Hi friends, I'm Jeff E.G. When I say there's a war brewing about AI music production, what I'm getting at is that the views around AI are getting more and more polarizing. And that should be no surprise because some of these AI tools are more powerful than they were a year ago, but a lot of musicians and artists are digging in their heels in the fight against AI. Never before in my experience have these two sides been further apart. And even in my own case, I use some of these AI tools, but I'm really starting to second guess whether they add value or take away my artistic integrity. In most wars, there's a lot of misinformation, but in this case, all the facts about AI for music production are fairly transparent. I put the AI tools into two broad categories. The first are programs like Suno or Udio, programs that can create complete music compositions. They replace all the functions that a musician would perform. The other category are helper tools that are aimed at musicians and producers to make their jobs easier. Things that would fall into that category are vocal enhancement or, say, mastering. And you could even argue that on those fronts, while those tools do take away jobs from the music industry, they do bring capabilities to your average hobbyist or home studio that are pretty powerful and useful. There's a third category that kind of spans both, and that is the generative MIDI apps, of which there are dozens now. Some of those apps do the most basic thing, like create a chord progression, which you bring into your DAW and then you can edit and manipulate and make it your own. Others will do everything. They'll create a bass line, drum parts, and there are tools out there that will create lyrics for you. It's really up to the creator to decide how much of those tools you want to use, and do they compensate for some skills that you're lacking. Like a lot of things in life, the amount of effort that you put in is directly related to the return you can expect. If you can create a whole song in 5 or 10 minutes just by typing in a creative prompt, then the value of the output is not worth more than 5 or 10 minutes. Compare that to an artist that might work on a song for weeks or months in order to make everything just right. The right drum part, the right keyboard part, a creative hook, insightful lyrics, and an arrangement that could appeal to a large audience. It takes more effort, but you expect a higher return.
You might have more talent than me. You might be smarter than me, you might be sexier than me, you might be all of those things. You got it on me in 9 categories. But if we get on the treadmill together, right, there's 2 things. You're getting off first, or I'm gonna die. It's really that simple, right? It's such a simple, basic concept. It's the guy who is willing to hustle the most is going to be the guy that just gets that loose ball.
On the one hand, the process of just creating a song for commercial purposes becomes kind of a technical effort. I'm just going through the steps. And that doesn't have a lot of value. But the artistic effort, which is what music has always been about, still remains, and there are people very committed to expressing their artistic emotions through music. Those two concepts are really the core of the conflict. Another important phenomenon is that there's a bell curve of all music, and a lot of music on that bell curve tends to focus to the middle where hits are made and the largest audience is likely to listen. My view is that AI drives all of music production to the middle of that bell curve, whereas rock and roll, pop music has always been a fringe element. In fact, a lot of songs become popular because they're further down the bell, they're on the fringes, they sound new, they're creative, and people lock into something that they haven't heard before. I would hate to see that freedom of pushing the boundaries of what is popular music go away. And that's what I see AI doing. Keep in mind that AI is based on a large data model of all the popular songs. And so the further detail you put into that prompt, the more it's going to drive towards the middle of the bell. But when you look at the artists over the last 50 years that have been the main drivers for popular music, they've always been on the fringe. Everything from Elvis and the Beatles to disco to punk to grunge. It's always been at the end of the bell curves. So how is this war going to get settled? Is it going to get worse before it gets better? I say yes.
His fear, the most modern of technologies, could destroy opportunities for the next generation.
As you get young guys, girls, coming up, and they write a beautiful song and they don't own it and they don't have anything to do with it, and anyone who wants can just rip it off. I mean, the truth is the money's going somewhere. You know, when it gets on the streaming platforms, somebody's getting it, and it should be the person who created it.
And my reason for that is the companies that are going to survive in the AI space have to figure out how to monetize what they're selling. So far, a lot of AI has been free, or at least free to try, but very few AI programs have a business model that's sustainable. Yeah, people will log on, try it out, create a song, maybe use those features to enhance their production, but how are they paying for it? And is there enough money being paid for it to sustain a company? This is the shakeout that typically happens in the software industry anyway. New ideas come to market, but only those that can monetize it and turn it into a repeatable business model stick around for the long term. Another factor is the existing dominant vendors in the music business. And you know who they are. They're Native Instruments and Universal Audio and big companies like Roland and Yamaha. Will they adopt AI software selectively into their product offering? Will they snap up a lot of these startups that they think are valuable? There's always a period of consolidation that starts to happen after 5 years of new technology hitting the market. And that's the phase that we're in right now. My view is the decision over who wins this war has a lot to do with money. It really has to do with whether there's broad market adoption of those new things. And that's a combination of having a good idea that works well, but also marketing and making it known to the broader community. That includes not just producers and studio owners, but record executives, and people with home studios or bedroom studios making the music in the first place. Another factor I'm sure you've heard a lot about is whether AI music is going to be regulated in some way, so that when you go on Spotify or Apple Music, you know as a consumer whether you're listening to AI-generated music or music that's been built by musicians and artists. The pricing could be different, but most important, the consumer needs to be aware. Right now, there aren't a lot of restrictions, and it would be easy for a lot of listeners to be fooled as to whether they're listening to an AI-generated song or a musician and artist created song. And that's not right. If you pay a subscription to a streaming service, you ought to be able to differentiate the effort that went into the song in the first place. Now, the record company perspective is one that scares me a bit. They have a vested interest in lowering the cost of the creative effort, paying less to musicians and artists. And by paying less, it's going to increase their profit margins. And that's why I think there has to be some regulation that levels the playing field here a bit. To use that war metaphor, this is the propaganda we're talking about. It's not dropping leaflets out of an airplane like it was in the 40s, but it's important that the consumer have all the information to make the best choices for them. Now, I've worked with some of these AI tools that do everything for you. They create the drum parts, the melodies, the chord progressions, the leads. They'll even come up with lyrics if you like. And after doing that 10 or 15 times, I find that my prompts are driving the music all towards a certain direction and everything starts to sound the same. So, as an educated listener, I'm starting to notice whether music is AI generated or artist created. Also, I'm particularly sympathetic to musicians who have developed their craft and their skill over many years. That's a big investment. To be proficient at some instruments, to be knowledgeable about how to arrange a song and make it popular is a set of skills that doesn't happen overnight. AI has allowed a lot of non-musicians to get into the music business. Some of them are there because they want to be famous. Some of them are there to make a quick, fast buck. And that backstory matters to me. When I choose to listen to a new band or a new artist, I want to know where they came from. What emotions are they trying to reach by creating this song? The backstory is very important to me. It's part of the overall branding of who I'm listening to. I don't see that AI is going to be able to support that whole branding approach. I could see it generating the music, but it's not going to swing the hips of Elvis. It's not going to put on the costume of Taylor Swift. It's not going to push the boundaries of language the way hip-hop can do. What are we learning about this war on AI? Well, record companies are suing Suno and Udio primarily because of their unauthorized use of the arsenal of music that's been accumulated in their large databases, by artists without their permission. There are more than 200 artists that are petitioning for music apps. We should be skeptical a little bit about record companies. Some AI tools are for producers, songwriters, and composers. They're not just designed to replace musicians and people in the music business. There are generative Midi tools that are not always AI. Sometimes they're built on algorithms. Monetization of some AI tools is really the next big challenge. Many of them don't make any money. Big music vendors that we mentioned are likely to consolidate and acquire some of these small companies with the latest technology. AI might be driven towards the center of that bell curve. And that means more music is going to sound the same. It's going to sound like popular music. It will not address the fringes. AI can't replicate the branding of artists and performers, which is a big selling factor these days.
If topics like this interest you, please subscribe to my channel, hit the notification bell, and you'll find out when I release new videos.